over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sean. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is James Jones. I am a teacher here at International House Torun. I will be a senior teacher next year here in Poland. So I've been teaching for about 2 years. I've gained lots of different ideas, lots of experience. I have got to mention that many of these ideas are from other teachers from different sessions I've seen and I've visited over the past couple of months. So I thought I'd like to share activities that we can do with dice. How can we use them in our lessons? How can we make certain activities a bit more fun and a bit more engaging as well for the students? So I'll be looking at a range of different ages, some for young learners, some for teens and for older students, and also breaking them down. So how can we set them up? How can we adapt them? And what sort of materials do we need for them? So one thing that I've done previously when I'm trying to get to know the students is warmers. We all do them, icebreakers when they meet for the first time, but also if maybe they've been on vacation for a while. You have different students that haven't seen each other before or haven't seen each other for a long time, and maybe they need to catch up or get to know each other. And yeah, you could ask your usual questions, what did you do last summer and etc. One thing you can use with dice is you put them in pairs, number on the board, each category. So for example, hobbies, food, TV and films. Then one person rolls the dice, maybe it's a 2, and then they ask their partner a question about food. Then the other person rolls the dice and it continues, and then you can swap partners and then they have a new person to speak to. You could also make this, if you have particular tenses that you want them to practice, you could board sort of future, ask them, they ask each other questions in the future, so maybe they roll a 6 and it's where are you going to go on holiday next year? Or they roll a 5 and maybe past tense. You could say, what football game did you watch last week, for example. Or maybe for lower levels, you could practice question forms. Again, where, how long, who, what. After students have finished and you've been monitoring, see what mistakes they've made, see if you're using, if you're trying to get them to use more complex tenses, are they using them? What language are they not using? Generally, it's good for students of different ages. I would say probably best pre-teens, teens, adults. It also works very well for one-to-one students as well. Maybe the first time you've met them and you want to know more about them, and they can also know more about you as well. So it's quite good for building rapport. Something else that I've done with younger learners is when maybe it's Christmas or Easter, and I get them to build a snowman or roll a rabbit, as I say it. So similar to before, but this time they have it on the handout. So they have 1 would be maybe ears, 2 would be eyes, and then maybe 3 would be a tail. So the student rolls the dice. It's a 3. They draw the tail. Before this as well, I forgot to mention, in order to draw the body, they have to roll a double. So it has to be double 2 or double 3 or double 4. And then they have to keep rolling until they have every single part of the body. One thing I definitely noticed about my students when they've done this in the past is that they love competing. They love being able to be the first student in the class to have all the body parts and have the whole thing coloured in. Also, if you're feeling a bit more ambitious and you think your students are relatively confident, you could get them to make their own one. So have a blank template, and then the dice numbers 1 to 6 listed, and then get them to draw the different parts. So they could be like fox ears, or tiger claws, or maybe stripes. And then they pass it to someone else in the class who has a dice. They roll the dice, and then they have to try and be the first to make whichever animal or creature that the previous student has made for them. If you have been looking at body parts or different parts of an animal, rather than them trying to roll each thing once, instead, if they roll a 2 once and then again, maybe they don't draw 1 pair of ears, they draw 4 pairs of ears. And you can end up with this crazy looking monster that's got 6 eyes and 3 tails and 2 arms and 5 legs, for example. Similar to the previous activity, and something that young learners like doing is they like making crazy looking monsters. If you need to consolidate vocabulary or lexical sets that you've been looking at, maybe in a particular unit in a course book, or you've been using flashcards with younger learners or lower level adults. Something else as well is where you can split the class into 2, have 2 teams, but 1 dice. Let's say 1 and 4 would be they have to mime whatever the word is. 2 and 5 would be draw, so they can draw it on a piece of paper, and then 3 and 6 would be describe it, but without saying the word. You could board the words, or you could have flashcards on the board. So maybe you choose one of them, tell the student which one it is, and then they have to show it, or they have to mime it depending on what their dice rolls, and then the opposing team has to then try and guess what it is, and they get points for doing this. Or if you wanted to make it maybe more student-centered, you could instead have them in 3s. So 1 student would be rolling the dice, and then you have 2 other students competing, so trying to guess what it is first, and then the one who's rolling the dice would take points, give points out, and then they would swap, and then they keep playing maybe for like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, until the person with the most points, who's guessed the most words correctly, would win. And it works well for small groups and large groups of students. Also, it does work with adults, although you might think maybe adults are a bit childish, or maybe they're not so willing to mime things. I think that it's a common myth that maybe adults just want to sit there and learn. I think as long as these games have a purpose, as long as there is a communicative purpose or a lexical purpose to what they're doing, then they will engage with it and they will be happy to do these things. If you wanted to revise grammar instead, you could do something similar. If you have, like you can see on the screen, perhaps you have a very high level class and you want to revise lots of different grammar points, you could use 2 dice. So again, 2 opposing teams, but with 2 dice. So you have more options, which they might end up with. Once they've thrown the dice, one team has to try and make a sentence. So maybe they have to try and make a sentence in used to, or with a third conditional. If it's correct, then they get a point, and if it's not correct, then the other team has a go at it as well. Maybe for lower levels, you could use one dice, but you could also perhaps use simpler things such as there is or there are. Practicing third-person S with maybe have stems such as he, and then present simple, or she, present simple. Also, you could use it for exam classes. A word formation set. Maybe they have, rather than making sentences, they have a word stem, and then they have to add a prefix or a suffix and try and make a different word from it. One thing I found as well is that a lot of my classes, when I asked them to write a story or to produce some sort of creative narrative, is that they often struggle. This is particularly true with teens and older students. They do have issues with creativity. So you can introduce dice to this to make it a bit more engaging. I've only given an example of two examples on the screen. You could start with, let's say they start their story with a long time ago, and then on the board you'd have again 1 to 6, but you'd have 2 pictures for each dice roll. They can only choose one. One would be a place and one would be a character. So if you wanted to practice narrative tenses, you could start with a long time ago, and there was a wolf called Jenny, and then they rolled again. The wolf went to a clothes shop and decided to buy a jacket because she was cold. And they rolled again, and then in the shop they found Red Riding Hood, who wanted to buy a brand new red handbag. Once they've written their stories, maybe give them 5 or 6 minutes, let them compare them, maybe choose the funniest or the most interesting ones, and also again check delayed error correction, see what mistakes they've made, how well they've done, etc. If again you wanted to make it more student-centered, they could create their own set of characters for the story. So they would have a 1 to 6 in their books, and then they would have to choose a picture, a character and a place for each of the numbers, and then they have to start rolling the dice and choosing rather than then deciding what order the story is going to take, the dice decides it for them. If perhaps a colleague has taken all of the dice and you've got none left, or maybe you don't have many dice on you, or you haven't got enough for all the students, you could simply type in roll a dice in Google and it will come up for you. You have a dice. Maybe if you had, for example, 2 opposing teams in previous activities that I've mentioned, then you could put it on a projector, or you could also download an app, get them to download an app on their phones. There's plenty of them on the app stores. They're generally free, and students actually like them. Sometimes they think, oh, it's really cool, and teacher, where did you find this? And for some reason, sometimes they find this more appealing than an actual physical dice. Maybe that's a sign of the times. Who knows? Lisa Phillips mentioned 6-sided dice pencils also work. Yes, absolutely. I think here at our school, we've got a 12-sided dice as well, so you could equally use that as well. So why use them? Well, it adds an element of chance. It adds an element of randomness and unpredictability. And when students think that this is a game, they're much more engaged, and simply rolling a dice again and again and seeing what number is going to come up seems to awaken some dormant instinct in them, where previously they would have sat in their chairs and been quite laissez-faire and quite sort of relaxed, and then suddenly they're woken up. Oh, is it going to be a 5? Is it going to be a 6? Is it going to be a 1? But they're also learning whilst doing it, and that there's a linguistic purpose to this. Also, it's applicable to a wide range of ages. You could bring some dice with you. Perhaps you haven't got enough materials, or maybe you've underplanned your lesson, and you can quite quickly conjure something up using dice that will be engaging, something other than simply back to the board or Pictionary or other sort of last minute activities that we do when we haven't got a lot of time, or when we just want some more basic practice. One thing I haven't mentioned, I didn't manage to include it in my slide, was board games as well. So one thing I've done previously is snakes and ladders, but they draw the snakes and they draw the ladders, and then you put the target language, if it's vocabulary, in each box. And then the students have to make a sentence, or they have to try and mime it, or they have to try and describe it, and then the other students guess what it is. Someone wrote, do you think dice activities are appropriate for Cambridge exam groups? I think as long as it has a purpose, whether it's word formation or grammar that you want to revise, or you've been teaching them, then yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I think you can use it. Beautiful hands. Yes. So I just wanted to thank everyone and anyone who's given me some ideas, contributed ideas to this. All the photos that I've used are either from Pixabay or they are my own. So if you're interested in using any of them, just send me an email. If you do have any questions, please let me know now. How do you deal with weaker students when making a story using the dice? You could pair students up. You could pair students together, and maybe 2 students take it in turns writing the story, and then you could also monitor, see if they're making any mistakes and correct them. That could be a solution to it. You could ensure that students are saying the word whilst they roll the dice. Therefore, they'd be practicing the language, practicing pronunciation of it. Generally, though, it would be more of a fun-based activity, something for them to do. Maybe I wouldn't do this one that often, the roll the rabbit, for younger learners. Maybe again, like during a seasonal lesson. For another question, I think.
Yeah, there's either a follow-up or another question coming, isn't there, from the same person? My question is, did you give the questions to your teachers to ask you, or did they generally make them up?
No, they generally made them up. Yes, I would have heard them. You're welcome.
So it looks like we're probably coming to the end of the questions then?
Yes, if you have any further comments or questions, email me. My email address is on the screen. Thank you very much. Thank you for any questions that people have asked. Thank you for listening. I hope it was useful. Thank you, Sean, as well.
Thank you very much. No, I'm a big believer in using dice in the classroom, so it's always good to see activities with them. I think it fits into my gaming kind of nature. So thank you very much for reminding me of some useful activities and joining the conference. And now let's stop